They tried to buy your secrets like merchants in a crooked bazaar, passing around counterfeit currency soaked in praise, promises, and performative affection. They thought everything had a price, that if they smiled wide enough, if they stood close enough, if they pretended long enough, they'd gain access to what you built in solitude. But some things can't be stolen. Some knowledge is earned through blood, time, and brutal rebirth. They wanted your formula, but not your failure. They wanted your insight, but not your insomnia. And when you refused to trade soul for strategy, they turned hostile, as if your refusal to be exploited made you the enemy. But you didn't retreat. You recalibrated. And that, right there, was the moment you turned the tables without even flipping them. They underestimated the weight of what you carried. Your secrets weren't theories. They were scars, and those scars weren't aesthetic. They were archives. Every healed wound a page, every silence a chapter. They assumed you'd give it all away for validation, that you'd be so starved for recognition, you'd hand them the blueprint just to be seen. But you didn't need applause. You needed silence, ownership, precision. You didn't need them to get it. You needed them to underestimate you. Because nothing collapses faster than a plan built on arrogance. And their plan was loud, flamboyant, doomed, while yours was silent, surgically built from shadow. When they tried to steal from you, they learned the hard way. You had already encrypted the whole system with your resilience. They treated knowledge like a product. You treated it like a process. That's why they failed. You had sweat, coded every part of your growth. They had never even sat in their own silence long enough to form a thought that wasn't crowd approved. You had earned every insight through fire. They tried to buy what only suffering can generate, and when you realized their intent was not to learn, but to leverage, something inside you pivoted. You let them think they were ahead. You let them think they were close. But while they studied your footprints, you were building wings. They wanted your path. You wanted altitude. The tables turned the moment you realized they couldn't touch your source because they were allergic to solitude. See, real growth isolates you. Real wisdom doesn't come with applause. It comes with nights you can't explain. It comes from standing in the middle of failure and not blinking. They tried to shortcut that. Thought proximity to you would grant them depth. But you were never their gateway. You were their mirror. And when they saw how empty their reflections looked next to your evolution, they panicked. You didn't reject them. You exposed them. With your silence. With your refusal to translate your journey into digestible sound bites. They came in the form of friends, lovers, allies, always smiling, always close enough to listen, but never close enough to bleed. And you knew the game. You just played it better. They took your kindness for confusion. But you weren't confused. You were collecting data, watching how they moved when they thought you were asleep, noting the questions they asked. Not to learn, but to map your design. You fed them pieces, just enough, and they mistook crumbs for bread. By the time they realized the recipe didn't work, you were already feeding off an entirely different system. You stopped explaining. You started observing, and eventually, they exposed themselves without your help. Psychologically, what terrified them most wasn't that you didn't share. It was that you didn't need to. They were wired for extraction. They only understand relationships in terms of benefit. But you've always been a builder. You weren't born to beg for belonging. You were forged to create impact in silence. So when they leaned in close, thinking your hunger for connection would crack you open, they met something else. Not bitterness, not cruelty, just steel. Just a kind of calm they couldn't decode, because they never built anything of their own. Their genius was recycled, yours was alchemical. Now they try to reverse the damage, act like they misunderstood, like they were just curious. But curiosity without respect is invasion. And you remember every attempt to mine your identity under the guise of admiration. You remember how they flinched when you stopped translating yourself, how they panicked when you stopped answering questions with emotional charity. You didn't punish them with rage, you punished them with detachment. And that's the cruelty they didn't prepare for. To be near someone like you and no longer be invited in. They'll never forget how it felt to watch your energy seal itself off, how you became inaccessible, not out of spite, but out of precision. You are no longer available for exploitation. That shift hit them harder than any confrontation. You didn't announce your boundaries. You became one. Now, they whisper to each other about what went wrong, trying to reverse, engineer a betrayal they committed while smiling. But betrayal doesn't forget, and you don't forgive illusions, especially not ones that tried to buy what only pain could teach you. Now, they orbit your success with eyes full of resentment and mouths full of what ifs. They wanted your formula, but now they imitate your silhouette. They move like you, speak like you, dress like you. But it's hollow, because copying the frame without enduring the fire that forged it is spiritual fraud. And the world feels that, people feel that. So their mimicry turns into mockery, and your silence becomes scripture, because real power can't be bought. It can't be studied in someone else's blueprint. It has to be bled into existence. So next time they come with compliments too early, interest too sudden, eyes too wide, you'll know. They're not admiring, they're prospecting. They see value, not humanity. And you'll smile. Let them think they've earned access. Give them just enough rope. Because the best kind of vengeance isn't exposure. It's letting them learn, once again, that the secrets they tried to buy were never for sale. They were weapons, and only you know how to wield them. They circle you like vultures scenting blood, seeking to corrupt what you stand for. Toxic people see honesty as a threat, a mirror they don't want facing them. So they lash out, not with knives, but with whispers, manipulations, and calculated deceit. Their weapons are subtle, half-truths disseminated at dinner tables, quiet recontextualizations that stain your reputation while they smile knowingly. These tactics come with precision. They don't need to scream. They just need to poison the water drop by drop. You own truth, and when someone owns clarity, it blinds people glued to their own smoke screens, so they go to extreme lengths, twisting stories, spreading rumors, orchestrating betrayal, just to rip your honesty apart, brick by fragile brick. They don't just want your truth gone, they want your integrity discredited. They know the power of what you stand for, and it terrifies them. The honest don't bend under pressure. They illuminate the pressure cooker, and when light hits blackness, shadows flee. Suddenly, they're not drowning in your presence. They're exposed, so they reconstruct reality. They create narratives where you are the unstable one. They recruit confidence, whisper doubts, turn trust into an unstable currency. And if one lie doesn't stick, they escalate. If rumor doesn't fracture your credibility, They fabricate scandals. Because in their world, truth is expendable and toxicity is currency. They don't just attack what you are. They attack where you're most vulnerable. Every kindness, every trust becomes ammunition in their arsenal to tear you down. Within that manipulation, they'll construct betrayal scenes where you seem the antagonist. The very people who once praised your transparency will perform shock and disappointment on command. They'll frame you as abrupt, harsh, unreasonable, someone who changed, even though the only change they saw was the mirror snapping back in their face. Suddenly, you're too loud, too blunt, too honest. It's ironic. Their problem is that you speak, and honesty is a mirror they can't shatter. But rather than shatter the mirror, they try to break the person holding it. That's the violence of toxicity, not the visible tear. It's the silent unraveling of trust and self, belief by people who once had your praise. This campaign morphs. They launch covered emotional attacks when your guard is down. A text out of context, an event misremembered, a blurred memory turned into a weapon. They invite collective participation gossip, groupthink, silent exclusion. Suddenly, your community feels like an execution site, and you're on the stand. They never fight with evidence. They fight with narrative. They don't need the truth, just something that'll make your honesty feel like harassment. And far too often, people believe the sound of consensus more than the logic of facts. You feel it, this gradual isolation, this slow erosion of warmth. You feel their eyes measuring every word, waiting for the next leap. In your honesty, you sense the hesitation, the pauses in conversations, the subtle distancing. You don't know how much you've lost until you're splintered from spaces you helped build. Toxicity doesn't just break your position. It scraps your foundation. And here's the blow: when honest people crumble, everyone around them second guesses their own truths. That's the ultimate strategy. Damage the standard bearer, and the standard starts to falter. But then, the moment of reckoning arrives, because honesty occupied your heart, not your hands. You didn't wield your truth as a weapon. You lived it. That kind of purity can't be erased. It only refines under pressure. When they've squeezed every drop of power from rumor, hostility, exclusion, you still stand. Your voice still resonates. But now your presence carries scars that are trophies, badges of having faced falsehood, emerged untainted. You realize something pivotal. They didn't tear you down. They highlighted your strength. Their force was the weight test. You passed. Now you speak. But not to defend, to remind. Your honesty becomes your weapon, the one tool they never anticipated. You speak in truths, sharp and undeniable,